When it comes to melee on League Start, you've pretty much only got one safe option at this point, and that build is Boneshatter. This build has almost everything that you could want. Excellent clear, excellent movement speed, it's extremely tanky, has lots of recovery built into it, has a very straightforward gearing path. The only difficult, I would say, item to obtain can be the weapon if you are apprehensive about crafting. And the only real downside to this build is the fact that its single target damage lacks a little bit. That being said, after you do gear it quite well, for the most part, you can kind of just stand still and beat bosses' faces in without having to worry too much. Now, you can't really just completely ignore pinnacle boss abilities, but for the most part, when it comes to all the way up through tier 16 maps and most content in the game, you're able to just stand still and break their bones. Now, as for the footage you're seeing in the background, this is an almost purely SSF character with very basic gear. And the reason I say almost completely SSF is that the one item that I have grabbed from my standard stash for the build that you're seeing in the background is Tanuahi. In Trade League, this item should be easily obtainable, and it is extremely powerful for Boneshatter, but we'll talk more about that later on. Now, talking about the ability Boneshatter, why is this ability so strong, and why is it the one melee build that actually functions properly? And to be honest with you, it's just because it has damage and it has clear. It is as simple as that. Boneshatter's main mechanic is the trauma mechanic. What trauma does is as you attack an enemy, you stack this trauma buff, and what the trauma buff gives you is more percentage damage per stack, as well as stacking added physical damage that you do to yourself. On top of that, Boneshatter has built-in AoE clear depending on the stun duration of the enemies that you're hitting. So it's just a little bit of stun duration stacked, we can do some pretty significant clear with this ability. Now, the Juggernaut is a relatively underused ascendancy, however, it makes sense on a Boneshatter build, because as you might remember, part of what trauma does is it gives us this stacking debuff that causes more and more and more physical damage to ourselves. And what the Juggernaut allows us to do is to mostly ignore that huge downside. The Juggernaut excels in preventing physical damage done as well as recovering from physical damage done. On top of this, it has access to a bunch of very useful mechanics, such as the inability to be slowed below base speed, which means that you're immune to chill, freeze, temporal chains, pretty much anything that could slow your character, as well as a ton of accuracy, and the ability to scale our armor for other things besides physical damage. This allows us to stack the trauma quite high without too much worry, because typically as this trauma stacks, you really start feeling the damage to yourself. However, the Juggernaut can ignore most of that, and you can easily scale up to 20 to 30 stacks of trauma without really feeling much damage at all. Now, quickly before we get into the details, I want to talk about what is in this guide and what you should expect. This guide may be updated over time as Path of Building is updated for the new league. We get access to tattoos and all kinds of other things. If you want the most up-to-date version of the POB, it is always going to be in the most recent video for this build that I have in the description. Beyond that, if the POB, this video, or the comment section below is not able to answer your question, I do have a specific thread on my Discord dedicated to this build where you can go in and talk to other people playing the build as well as some people who might be able to answer your questions. I will do my best to answer questions in that channel, but please do keep questions about Boneshatter to that one specific channel. I don't want the rest of my community getting flooded with questions about League Start builds. A link to my Discord will be down in the description. Beyond that, I'll go in depth on all of the different Path of Buildings, how to use them, what you should be looking for, as well as giving a brief overview of the character in-game. So without further ado, let's begin. Now, as always, there are going to be chapters down below the video, so you can jump to each particular section if you're coming back to the video and you want to have, like, you know, some particular thing that you want to check out. Now, I will go in depth in the POB. That's going to be what I do for most of the rest of the video. However, I do want to talk about this particular character that you see on your screen now. So this is the character that you saw the previous clips from. This is an SSF character. The only piece of gear that is not from SSF is this Tanuahi. I grabbed this from my standard stash because I wanted to showcase it on the build. This is a very powerful set of gloves for this build, as I talked about previously. The rest of this gear is actually terrible. 481 Fizz DPS, like some just armor life resistance items. I'm on 4 links. Some of my gear is actually like miserably bad. This is the character that you saw. And beyond that, I'm not even resist capped. So if I show you very much, I'm probably just going to die randomly to like a corpse explosion or something like that is probably what's going to happen here. But yeah, this character is on absolutely no gear. I was able to take this character from all the way at the beach to the Eater and Exarch in about 14 hours. If you're interested in seeing the VODs for that, it's in the live section on my YouTube. Go to my main channel, hit the live tab, and then you'll be able to see the VODs for like Solo Self-Found, Boneshatter, Jug. You'll be able to see that entire playthrough, everything that we went through, if you're curious to see how the League Start experience is. That is on SSF, however. Now, I do want to give you an idea about how this character works. Let's just jump into this random Dunes map. I want to give you an idea of how Boneshatter works, how trauma stacking works, and the reason why this ability is so powerful. Now, let's hope that we don't die here, but we're going to walk up and you'll see that when I start attacking enemies, I will get this buff up in the top left called Trauma. Now, what this buff does is this is the stacking buff that gives us more damage as well as damage taken to ourselves. Now, the Juggernaut is able to mostly ignore all of the self-damage thanks to our Ascendancy. However, the more damage at level 20 goes up to 4% more damage every stack. Now, my gems are only level 19, so I'm only getting 3% more damage, so I could be doing quite a bit more damage with just one more gem level, but unrealistic in a super early Solo Self-Found environment. Now, beyond that, this gem also does have the line where it says Pulse has increased area of effect per 0.1 of stun duration. So we get a little bit of stun duration on the tree, and we do a lot of like heavy hitting physical damage. So you'll notice that there's these little pulses that happen around the enemies that we're attacking. And because we have things like this Ancestral Cry, you'll notice we attack a lot of different targets at once. So when these packs are pretty dense, we get some pretty big giant AoE pops going on, as you can see here. So these are the two main reasons why Boneshatter is so strong, and most other melee abilities kind of just fall behind it. It's got good damage scaling. I mean, it has like good effectiveness of damage. I'll show you here in town. This ability has good effectiveness of damage, so 247 at level 19. It's got 142 to 213 added physical damage, the melee strike range, and then it's got the whole trauma stacking thing beyond that, as well as the extra clear and all that kind of good stuff. So it's going to be really hard for other abilities to compete with Boneshatter. It's just really strong. So that's most of what I wanted to show you on the character. This is a super SSF character plus the Tanuahi, easily able to clear all the way up into tier 16 maps as well as bosses and everything. Single target damage is a little low, but it would be substantially better with a better axe, a better tree, and better gear. So on trade, you'll do significantly better than what you see this character doing. Now let's go ahead and jump into the PoB so I can go in depth and show you what you should be doing and how to follow these PoBs for your League Start. All right, so down in the description, there are going to be 3 PoBs. One is going to be a cheap early in-game PoB, very basic gear, a suppression PoB, which is the second one that you're going to try to transition into. Gear is a little bit more expensive. You should be able to do most everything, including most of the pinnacle bosses that are capable by this build, talking like Eater, Exarch, maybe Maven, maybe Uber Elder if you're a very good player. Should be able to do most of that on the spell suppression version. And then if you want to push the build even further, there is a 4th Vow, shout out to Tripolar Bear or whoever he got the idea from for the 4th Vow version of this build that I've included as well. Now, notably, you can go much further with this build to like 20-30 divines and get significantly stronger. I have not included that in here because this is a League Start PoB. This should be able to get you through most content in the game, but if you're looking for that big super duper giant build, go look at PoE Ninja at the very end of Crucible and just see what the people at the top are doing. But let's talk about these 3 PoBs. So first, we're going to go into the leveling and early in-game PoB, and we'll talk about the notes later. So the first thing is the leveling section. There are a bunch of different sections here. You'll notice that it starts at Act 1, and this tells you individually where you are supposed to go with your points as you go through the game. You'll notice that early on, we head through melee damage, grab some life, and we start getting accuracy. You are really going to need this accuracy early on when you're using big two-handed weapons. The Marauder doesn't have access to very much accuracy besides these couple of nodes, so we have to take them, and it's very important for later on. So we're going to come through here, we're going to grab this life, recovery. These nodes are very powerful, don't skip them. The main reason being is that they give you stun duration on these nodes. That's going to increase the AoE of Boneshatter later on, and these are just good nodes early. Beyond that, you can grab this one little tiny life physical damage leech node if you need it early on, and then we're going to come into this accuracy. As we move through, we grab more accuracy, we come down here, we grab call to arms and a little bit of life. This is just a quality of life buff. Call to arms is very, very powerful. I suggest that you get it early so that you can put your war cries on your left click and forget about them for the rest of the game. Now we're going to head over towards the right because the main thing that we're trying to do here is go fast early in the game. Early on in Path of Exile, when you are trying to level, you just need to keep those feet moving. That is the number one thing that people do wrong when they're trying to get through the campaigns quickly. To facilitate that, we want to get Onslaught as early as we can. Hatchet Master gives us a 20% chance to gain Onslaught, which is going to make us move faster. Beyond that, we are prepping for our transition into Boneshatter. Now, you can transfer to Boneshatter whenever you like, but I do it around the first lab. The things that you need for that are the first lab, which we'll talk about in a moment, but you also need this Tribal Fury node, the Attack Mastery that gives non-Vol strike skills target one additional nearby enemy. The reason for this is that on single target, this increases your range a little bit, and it's just going to make your clear a little better. And then we're also going to be heading up this way towards Inexorable. Inexorable is a very good source of endurance charges because it says chance to gain endurance charge when you are hit, and Boneshatter hits yourself and procs this. Beyond that, we will be getting our first Ascendancy node, which is Untiring. This is the node that allows you to go Boneshatter in the Juggernaut. You'll see this line that says 1.5% of physical damage prevented from hits in the past 10 seconds is regenerated as life per second. And then it also has 40% increased life regeneration rate. So the whole idea behind this is Boneshatter is dealing physical damage to us. We stack armor as much as we can to prevent that physical damage. However, that prevented physical damage is being regenerated at 1.5% over the last 10 seconds. So it's just ramping our recovery that entire time. So this allows us to go Boneshatter, almost single-handedly allows us to completely ignore that negative of it. Now, beyond that, we are going to be moving over to the right now. So as we move forward, we're going to be moving all the way over this way because we are headed towards Precise Technique. We go through a bunch of movement speed, some range, some life, armor, evasion, some dexterity nodes, which are much needed. We do grab this one life and mana leech node because we do need a little bit of mana leech. With this node, you can drop mana flasks completely early on in the game. And then we head over to probably the most difficult to understand concept for this build, and that is going to be Precise Technique. If there's anything that's complicated about this, it's this node. So the whole idea behind this node is we completely give up the ability to do critical strikes so that we can deal 40% more attack damage if our accuracy rating is higher than our maximum life. So the whole idea here is that now we are going to try to focus on balancing our accuracy and balancing our life so that our accuracy is just a little bit higher than whatever our max life total is. So the way that we're going to be doing this is that you might have remembered we took these accuracy nodes here on the left. When we get that node, we're going to swap over to these accuracy nodes on the right. These are just a little bit better for our build because these ones are crit nodes, and you might remember from grabbing this node over here, we can no longer crit. So we get some accuracy here, we get this mastery, which gives us a ton of accuracy early on. This is most of what we need, and on top of that, this gives us some elemental resistances. Now, one other good thing about being the Juggernaut is that when we do get our second Ascendancy, which is undeniable, we are able to gain a bunch of base accuracy because of this, and we are able to increase our attack speed based off of all this accuracy that we're stacking. So a super powerful node, and we do take it second on the Juggernaut. Now, beyond this, as we move through the rest of the axe, we're just going to be filling in a couple little damage nodes here. You'll notice that we fill in these axe nodes up at the top. When we move into maps, we're going to be grabbing some extra armor early on until we're able to get a really good chest piece, as well as some like resistances and such, a little bit more damage, and you'll see that we start taking some of these aura nodes here and a little bit more life. This is so we can swap into our in-game aura section. As we move into red maps, we're getting even more maximum resistances. This is to kind of give us a buffer until you're able to get that spell suppression or swap into the fourth Vow version later on. And then at the end of red maps, we're going to get to the finalized tree, which is the first in-game tree. Now, this tree has been optimized for this set of gear that you can see here. The whole idea here is that we have moved some nodes around in the start, moved some of these nodes around so that we can optimize life, damage, and maximum resistances, as well as making sure we're covered for accuracy and all those kinds of good things. As for our ascendancies, you might notice that I didn't say anything about the next two because they're not super important. You will go Unbreakable next as your third ascendancy. It is one of the main ways that we are able to prevent elemental damage, and then your last ascendancy is going to be Unstoppable. This is pretty powerful. It's a very unique effect because it gives you not only immunity to stun, but it also makes you immune to freeze and to chill and all those other things because you cannot be slowed below the base value. So Unstoppable is a really powerful node, especially later on, means that you don't need freeze immunity, don't need chill immunity, don't really need like temp chains immunity or anything like that. Pretty powerful node. One last thing that I want to talk about on the tree are these nodes down here. So the idea here is that totems are not super tanky, however they are a huge part of the damage of this build. So when you come down here, Panopticon is an unbelievably powerful node. It does a ton of damage for the build. 50% increased effective buffs for your ancestor totems. You might notice that this one little node here says 13.6% of full DPS, 18.9% of combined DPS. So it's kind of a silly node, and we do take these nodes before here because this is going to make our totems survive a little bit better. And then this totem mastery here, buffs from active ancestor totems linger for 3 seconds. Just a nice quality of life thing. That's going to be pretty much it for the tree. Let's talk about the basic gear real quick. So early on, there will be 2 sets of gear. You've got your early mapping gear, where we're going to be using just a Sinvicta's, or if you can get a budget crafted axe or just a good axe, go for that. A Sinvicta's should be super cheap early on though. You're going to be grabbing a bunch of like armor, life, and resistance pieces, and then Tanuahi. That's pretty much all that you really care about here. Just get your resistances covered, as much armor as you can get on your gear, and as much life as you can get on your gear, as well as just these 2 uniques. Now, as you move into the endgame gear, this is the first early set of endgame gear. You're going to be crafting that budget axe, which there's going to be some notes for that I'll talk about later on. You're going to be putting some Eldritch Implicits on your gear, and you're going to be maybe trying to upgrade to the Magnate. It depends on how expensive this item is. It really fluctuates. It's good. You don't need it. You can just use a normal belt for quite a while with just some resistances and such. But if the Magnate isn't too expensive by the time that you get around to it, go ahead and grab it. It's just a very nice item for mapping. Don't forget flasks. Flasks are very important. You should be trying to get these flasks rolled well as early as you can. You do want gain charges on being hit by an enemy, as well as just some good modifiers for your build. There's more information about those in the notes. Now, as for our skills, there are a couple early leveling skills. This is really only to tell you the main differences from the Boneshatter links. You'll be leveling with Ground Slam early on, or you can take any other ability that you want on the Marauder. Some people like taking over like some of the Impale Steel gems if you want to use those. At 12 though, you should be using Sunder. Sunder is very powerful. It'll get you all the way up to the point where you can swap over to Boneshatter. You'll be using Seismic Cry early on, and you'll be using Warbanner, Blood and Sand, and Flesh and Stone until you're able to swap over to Boneshatter, at which point you're going to want Determination so that you don't die. As for the normal links, you're just going to go in order that you see here. You can swap these up a little bit, but try to follow what I've put in the POB. You'll notice that I don't have a 6 link here. These are level 19 gems with 0% quality. In a league start scenario, you are not going to have above level 19 gems or pretty much any quality on any of your gems until you are past like Eater and Exarch most of the time. It is just simply not reasonable for you to have those kinds of things. You'll see a lot of POBs that have like 20 gems in the very budget sections. Be wary. I don't think they're doing it maliciously, but it is not realistic in any manner for very early on you to have those kinds of gems. Beyond that, we do have our second big link. Keep in mind that this is a 5 link and then a 1 socket here. This Berserk can be any other of your just single use skills, and you'll want to add in like Culling Strike and Multi-Totem should definitely be your 4 link, which should be easy to get. Once you get the 5 link, add in that MAME, and then the 6th socket, not a 6th link, should be your Berserk. We've got some auras here: Determination, Warbanner, Pride. You've got Blood Rage, which is pretty nice early on. If you don't have enough dexterity for this Blood Rage, just lower it down a little bit. Even level 18 is fine. It just gives you a little bit of attack speed. We've got our movement abilities: Leap, Slam, and faster attacks. That's how we were zooming through those maps with Berserk. We got Ancestral Cry on our left click. This gives us a bunch of armor, as well as the huge amount of clear where we've got like 2 additional targets and we can hit a whole bunch of stuff at the same time. Frostblink is really useful for movement. When you're trying to like micro change positions on a boss and you don't want to have to move to do it, Frostblink is an instant skill that you can use in the middle of using other abilities. Next, we have this cast when damage taken here. This is a little bit weird looking, but the idea is that we're causing so much damage to ourselves constantly that we're able to use a cast when damage taken pretty consistently to proc all of our abilities. We can use Molten Shell, Vulnerability, or Warlord's Mark. While you're clearing, you should probably be using Warlord's Mark to facilitate more rage, and on bosses you can slot in Vulnerability. You can also slot in just like a level 19-20 vulnerability and self-cast it if you want to. That's perfectly fine. It'll cause you to do more damage, but you'll have to reapply that curse occasionally. And then we use Life Tap because these can get pretty expensive when we're proccing them constantly. And that's going to be pretty much it for the early skills, items, and skill trees. Now, once you've gotten to this point and you felt that you've got all of this gear and everything seems solid about your character, you're probably like moving towards red maps and you're really starting to get some of your, basics down. You're going to want to move to the second POB, which is going to be the Spell Suppression POB. Now, the idea here is that this Spell Suppression POB is going to be quite a bit of a jump when it comes to gear because you are going to have to get spell suppression on that gear. It also is a couple levels higher. You'll see this PoB is level 93. In this PoB, we are going to be taking these suppression nodes because they're very easy access for us. On top of that, we are going to be taking these evasion nodes here because of this evasion mastery. We're going to be getting as much spell suppression as we can in our gear. Early on, when you are making the transition into this, you can use this notable that says chance to suppress spell damage is lucky. Your ideal circumstance is don't use that and get 100% spell suppression, but until you are there, it is a very good mastery to use, just helps out a ton. Now beyond that, these trees are not significantly different. We are using iron reflexes to convert all of that evasion that we do have into armor. Beyond that, there's not really much that changed. We took like a couple points out here. We're using like an accuracy jewel to give us a little bit more accuracy. When it comes to skills, by this point, you'll probably get level 20 gems, but you're probably not going to have any alt qualities. You're probably not going to have very much quality on your gems. Definitely not going to have like awakened gems and stuff like that. However, you should have your 5 link. You should probably have your 6 link in your body armor by now. Got all of your auras set up and all that good stuff, so you should be set in that regard. When it comes to your items, you will most likely be moving to like a higher DPS axe. You'll be moving towards spell suppression gear that has implicits crafted on them with the Eldritch stuff. Tanuahi again. We've got Hinakora's Sight. This is just a pretty solid amulet because it gives us a bunch of evasion, which is going to be transformed into armor. Gives us all the accuracy that we need to be able to stay above our life total. You can allocate Inveterate on it, which is going to be some spell suppression. It's got some stats and some extra effective spell suppression. Beyond that, same stuff as before, slightly better flasks and that Abyss Jewel. Nothing else has really changed here. This PoB is where the vast majority of you will probably end. I don't think you'll make it much further than this. However, if you want to, I do want to give a quick shout out to either Tripolar Bear or whoever else came up with this idea for Boneshatter. I'm not 100% certain. I was thinking about using 4th Vow, but I didn't really know how well it would work. When I was checking out all of the other Boneshatter PoBs to see what everybody else was doing, this looked pretty good from him, so shout out to him. It's not exactly following it, but it's heavily inspired by it. So the idea here is we have moved around stuff slightly, and you might notice that there's this big circle here from this Timeless Jewel. So the whole mechanic of this in-game version of the PoB is going to be utilizing our armor to be able to help more against chaos damage and elemental damage. The first step of that, before we get here, is going to be the 4th Vow. This makes it so that physical damage taken bypasses energy shield. We don't use energy shield anyways, but it causes armor to also apply to chaos damage taken from hits. So you might notice that in all of these PoBs, we've had a ton of armor, like 90% physical damage reduction, right? When we really get things stacking and like flasks are going and such, I mean, we've got a crazy amount of armor, right? So all of this armor is now going to be able to apply to chaos damage taken from hits. So you might remember that since we're the Juggernaut, we also are able to have 8% of our armor apply to fire, cold, and lightning damage. However, with that chest piece, as well as this Timeless Jewel, which gives Divine Flesh, all damage taken bypasses energy shield. We don't care about it anyways. We don't use energy shield. And 50% of elemental damage is taken as chaos damage, plus 5 to maximum chaos resistance. So what this allows us to do is that if we max out our chaos resistance at 80% here now thanks to this, half of elemental damage is being taken as chaos damage, which we have 80 resistance for. And on top of that, we are able to apply our armor to chaos damage taken from hits, meaning that we are going to take a ton less of basically every kind of damage. You might notice up here at the top that on top of our fizz hit, which isn't amazing, but it's really hard to get fizz hit much higher than that if you're not like insanely stacking certain things, because I don't have like Molten Shell or anything procced here, but look at our like elemental hit and our chaos hit. It's honestly kind of insane. So you'll be super tanky here. Beyond that, the skill tree is not really much different. We've moved a couple nodes around. We're now using this mastery here, which gives us some more damage recoup. If our leech has been removed recently, which as you know, because of Tanuahi, we always are having that effect on us, we have swapped over to these fortify nodes. And we have swapped over to these fortify nodes. The main reason for this is that we are going to drop fortify to be able to use the impale gem here. Because we want to be using awaken melee fizz, this gives us intimidate and a whole bunch of other good stuff. So impale here is very nice on a physical damage build. We take a couple impale nodes beyond that. We've got like impale chance on our weapon. So the impale gem is actually one of the better gems for this build later on. However, the gem that you drop is fortify. You take these nodes, it gets you up to 23 maximum fortify and all of your melee hits fortify, a big defensive layer for the build. Beyond that, nothing else has changed besides a couple of jewels, and we'll go over that in the gear. But let's talk about skills first. Here we are now using alt quality gems as well as we have quality to all of our gems. This is around the time when you should be thinking about doing this. You should be really investing those GCPs and upgrading to the different versions of all of these items. Now, notably, I actually did not fix this, so I'll go ahead and put it in here, but this should be Ancestral Protector there with 20% because Phantasmal Ancestral Protector is actually pretty strong, a lot more damage. Alt quality gems, quality on gems that matter. You could go with quality Berserk here if you want to as well. I guess I missed some of these, but that's the idea. You could go for level 21 determination if you wanted some extra stuff there, but alt qualities, quality on the actual gems themselves, as well as, you know, some awakened gems and such. Now you might notice that it says check notes for accuracy and precision info. I'll address it quickly, but I'll talk about it more later in the notes. Essentially, a lot of these items have a lot of accuracy on them. If you're not able to maintain these, you're just going to be dropping like Maim or Culling Strike or like faster attacks to be able to fit in an arrogance plus a precision. That'll make it so that you cap your accuracy over your life total. Let's talk about items real quick. Now, the crafted axe is getting better. We've gotten a much higher tier crafted axe. You could go even further beyond this. You can get up to like 850, 900 PDPS crafted axes, relatively straightforward. You'll notice there's a very expensive crafted axe in here that's 855. Information about crafting these is all in the notes. And then beyond that, we've got some much more effective helmets. We really need to min-max resistances as well as stats at this point in the build because you have to have that 80+% chaos res. So we're really gonna have to be focusing on getting like chaos resistance on a lot of pieces of gear, amethyst rings, getting stats, resistances, accuracy on all of this gear. This is a lot harder to get. We'll talk about how to craft it here in a moment. We've upgraded our flasks, everything is significantly better here, and then we talk about the jewels. Now, the first jewel that I want to talk about is going to be this Nature's Patience. What this does is it causes us to start gaining Grasping Vines, and we get buffs because of that. And because we are a Juggernaut and we have this Unstoppable node right here, we cannot have our action speed modified below base value. So the idea here is that typically Grasping Vines give you like a bunch of negative action speed and movement speed and all that kind of stuff. We completely ignore that because we're the Juggernaut. We stand still for long periods of time anyway, so this makes us do a bunch of chance to double damage, less damage taken, just a really solid, powerful jewel. Beyond that, we were using Storm Shroud. The idea behind this is that this is expensive, but it is the way that we are getting our elemental ailment avoidance. This plus these boots plus just a couple nodes on the tree is enough to have all of the elemental ailment avoidance that we need. These boots are relatively straightforward to craft, once again, notes on them, but they've got chance to avoid being shocked on the implicit, as well as chance to avoid being shocked from an essence. Beyond that, we use a Watcher's Eye. If you do have a 100% chance to impale, impales you inflict last 2 additional hits is pretty good. Beyond that, get pretty much any good mods that you can that fit your auras that you have, and then the Glorious Vanity that we talked about earlier. Now you can try to min-max this a little bit if you want and get like this node to be good. You can use the Timeless Jewel tool that's underneath my camera that you can't see here. Down on the bottom right here, you can use this tool. Go for a very specific one if you want, but probably not worth it early on. So that is it for the items. Let's talk about the last thing, which is going to be these notes. So notably about the notes, there are different versions of these notes for every single one of these PoBs. So you should be following the notes for the first versions of the PoB, the second version, and the third version because they are a little bit different. There's a bunch of information in here, like it's giving you some like disclaimers and stuff. It tells you which PoB that you're actually on. It talks about some like things to remember, frequently asked questions, important stats that you should be tracking, how to gear. This is where I start talking about how to craft all of the items. There's crafting notes on pretty much every single piece of gear that is rare in here, how to go about it, maybe alternate ways to go about it, including like which Watcher's Eye mods you should be going for, Forbidden Flesh, Forbidden Flame, Timeless Jewels, Impossible Escape, etc., etc. Talking about gameplay and leveling and all that kind of stuff. There's a bunch of information in here. If none of that works for you, as I said before, you can go to the Discord, go to that specific channel made for this build. But beyond that, as long as I haven't forgotten anything, I think that's pretty much it for the build. So if you end up playing Melee, I hope you enjoy this build. I hope I've put in enough detail into the guide that you're able to get through everything that you need to. Boneshatter's a pretty fun ability. It was probably one of the more solid League starters that I've done in recent time that I've tested. So I hope that you enjoy it. I hope that you have a good League start in 3.22. The Ancestors League, where we're going to be playing essentially like an auto battler kind of thing. We'll see how all of that goes. But remember, boys, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to give this video a like, subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit that notification bell to stay up to date with all the latest videos, and stay safe out there in Ray Class, and I'll see you guys in the next video.